Thank you very much. Right, I'm just going to see that we've got the right bits up here. Okay, guys, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I must say it's been great coming to the Netherlands once again. I think every time I come here, it's so inspiring. I always think of perhaps a bit insular almost, that London's at the forefront of workplace design, and it's only when I come here that I really see what's going on. You guys certainly seem to push the boundaries, so thank you very much for that. And it's also been great to hear about the concepts you guys have been talking about. And I'm not going to talk about so many concepts, but a bit more about the data that supports some of those concepts and how you get your business to support some of these ideas going forward. But what I don't want to do, first of all, is talk about real estate. I think we've had some great discussion on that, and I want to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, and that's sport. Okay, I'm really passionate about sport, and none more so than when there's data involved. I get a bit techie with all the stuff that goes around it. And one of the sports that really, really do this well is Grand Prix. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Formula One. Now, you may have seen this film. It's called Rush. It's directed by Ron Howard. It's in the cinema at the moment. And it talks about the titanic battle in 1976 between the Austrian Niki Lauda and the Brit James Hunt. Now, guys, if you've seen that, you'll see it's full of explosions, excitement, full of drama and all the glamour you'd expect in the world of F1. But what you don't see is the fact that these guys, they came off the track afterwards, and this is the bit that I'm interested in. They come off the track afterwards and nobody really knew what was going on in those cars. They had no idea. The engineers were flummoxed. They just had to ask the drivers. Now, if you had to ask James Hunt, after a heavy weekend and a bit of driving, what was going on in that car, the data's not going to be that great. Okay, so you've got that problem to contend with. Now, you fast forward to today, and the engineers in F1 look at that period as a time when it was really called the analog years. They didn't really know what to do. And nowadays, they have a wealth of data. And you see these guys to the side of the track, and they're there with their screens, usually not facing the racing, by the way. They don't even bother watching it. And they're looking at screens, and they're manipulating figures, and they're looking at different scenarios and running these examples really quickly so they can make the best decisions based on that information to give them the most advantage. And, you know, we've seen Sebastian Vettel's excelled in this. His team are superb. They very rarely make a mistake. And it's so much so these guys know pretty much everything about these cars. They know how much G-force is being put down into these cars. They know how much sweat those drivers are losing. So if these guys are becoming unhydrated, then they could make a mistake. So they make sure they're talking to them constantly to make sure they have the best outcome. So much so that they say that if you drove one of these cars at maximum speed with the G-force and the design capability that they have, you could potentially drive one of these cars around the ceiling. Now, I'm not sure if that's true. I'm pretty certain nobody's tried it, but you know, it's an interesting fact. So fast forward to today. How do we bring this back into the world of real estate? Well, I believe that technology is the key. We need to understand what's going on in our buildings, have a level of insight rather than just instinct. And what I'm going to do in the next 20 minutes or so is talk to you a little bit about how you can use some of the data available to you today to provide you with that level of insight. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about utilization. I know a few guys have already talked about that in brief, Frank and a few others. And then I'm going to take you through an analytical business case, which is not as dry as it sounds. I'll take you from start to finish and how you can really take this back up the business to make them interested in it. Okay. So utilization. You know, why do we care about utilization? Why is it important? Well, firstly, it gives you that idea of what's going on in your properties, what's going on in your portfolio. And I guess over the last 2 years, the map behind me shows an example of some of the surveys that we've conducted. And it's over 20 countries, and I think around about 120 surveys. And in that time, we've looked at around about 170,000 desks. Now, you'll see some of the metrics. I'm not sure if you can read them all up there. But there are differences in average utilization across the globe, and tend to be, and this is a very, very average thing. In North America and Western Europe, we're looking at around about 40 to 50%. And then in other parts of the world, such as Latin America, Asia, and Southern Europe, we're getting higher average utilizations. But overall, on a global perspective, we get an average of around about 48% globally. Now, to put some context around this, if we've got 170,000 desks, that is 37,000, and a target utilization of 70%, we're looking at a shortfall there of about 37,000 available desks. And that is an opportunity to look after. So what I'm going to do now, I'll explain a little bit about why I think technology can really open up these opportunities for us and gives us that insight that we're looking for. And I was talking earlier on to one of my colleagues, actually, and I always think that my mind is really open to the power of technology and how its advances can really change the way we do things. And as a young naval engineer, I joined a warship back in about 2000, and I had my first tour with the weapons officer. And I walked into this room, and it was about 10 foot by 6 foot square, filled with large cabinets. And I said, "What's this room?" And he said, "This room is the computer control system for the weapons system." And I thought, wow, that's amazing. He says, "Well, we don't use that anymore. We use this." And he picked up the laptop. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing. So this whole room is obsolete, and he's using a laptop to do exactly the same thing. And that's the power of technology. And I guess if I went there now, we'd probably have an iPad. So it moves on very quickly. So when did we start using technology to measure utilization? Well, we used to do, as somebody alluded to earlier, paper studies. But then we started to look at PDAs, but it was very much people-orientated, people walking around. And then we decided to start getting a bit more real-time information, which is where we think the opportunities really are. And we started off with RFIDs, which are like little key fobs that people could hold. And they pop them in their pocket, and they get traced around, and we see what they're doing, and it gives you brilliant information, granular information, and you know everything that's going on in that building. The only problem we had was, and can I get any suggestions what it might be? Exactly. So people were the problem. They didn't want to carry around something, and there was issues about, as we said, workforces and so on, pushing back against this. So we realized, by the way, as an add-on to that, I recently spoke to a scientific organization, and they did exactly the same thing. And because it's a scientific experiment, all the scientists thought it was great, and they couldn't get enough of it. So if you ever want to do a survey, use RFIDs in science facilities. So going on from that, we started to look at another device, which is a people counter. And these things sit on the ceiling, and they count ins and outs of buildings, or ins and outs of floors, or ins and outs of zones. And they use thermal imagery to do this. And if you ever see when they're like a circle with a cross on, and you see a series of dots, and they're basically counting in and out of that space. Now, these are great. In fact, we still use these today, and I've seen them in the marketplace quite a lot. But we realized this was only giving us half of the picture. Now, what we wanted to do was understand what happens in that space once they've gone into it. And that's where we started looking at other devices. We started looking at desk monitors, okay? So desk monitors actually are low-cost devices, and I've got a couple here. And these sit underneath, if I could just, could you just hand these out? Okay, that's 4 there. And these just sit underneath a desk. They're totally wireless. And they send a signal to a central receiver on a floor. That receiver then goes to either a server point within the building and sends up via secure internet to a controlled server in a central location. And what these devices do is give you a real-time indication of what's happening in that desk space. Now, I've got the reason I've passed out those devices, I've got an actual demo, which I can show you now. So if the people, who's got the devices? Put your hands up. Okay, so if you just hold them so, you'll see there's 2 little sensors on one side. If you point that away from you, you should see that they've all gone green. Wait for a second. Yeah, last one. Who's got the last one? Turn it around. There you go. So they've gone green. And it's quite simply, that's how quick it is. So if you cover your hand over them again, it should go red. And that gives you an indication that there's somebody sat there. And they've got 2 sensors on each one. One is infrared or thermal, and the other one is just motion. So what we don't want to do is it to pick up a chair. We need it to be a human being. Somebody alive needs to be at that chair. And we also, when we looked at making this system, we had a secondary benefit. We realized that this portal, this thing that you see here, it's a great way to find a space on a floor. You know, you come into a space, you're in an open plan area, and you're like, well, where do I sit? And you've got a visual display, and you can actually sit down and see which desks are available, and you can go towards them. So it gives us a whole level of data that we didn't previously have. I'll have to collect those back at the end, by the way, guys. All right. Okay, there we go. So we've got the data. We've captured the data in a very simple way. We're getting that to the place that we want it to get to. How do we then convert that data into intelligence, something that we can actually start to use. Okay, and this is the graph I think we saw earlier on. This is your typical utilization graph, measured in this instance, every half hour throughout a day. And we're looking at basically three things here, which is the occupied space, where quite clearly that's where somebody sat down. The not in use space, again, very clear, nobody's there. But in the middle, there's this temporarily away. Somebody's there is life, signs of life, but there's nobody physically there at the time of the survey. So this is the area that's very interesting for us. And just to help you read that graph, I think up there is the kind of 11:30 point is where we have the peak occupancy. So looking at this temporarily away area, we're now able to take it to another level with these devices because we've got this real-time interaction, so we can see what's going on. And we're able to split it up into another way. So now we're able to look at three different areas, which is really instructive about what's going on in that space. We've got the micro absences, which are less than 15 minutes. So typically somebody getting up, walking around, maybe getting a coffee, going to a copier, a quick question with somebody and coming back. We've got the medium-term absences, which sit in the middle, and these are typical meeting times. So anywhere between 15 minutes and 2 hours, somebody wouldn't usually have a meeting or a phone conference or something where they'd be away from their desk. And it's interesting because that's often the threshold, the 2 hours, where if a business is running an open plan policy, the etiquette is that you might want to release the desk at that point after 2 hours. And then this top section, which looks at the macro absences, the 2 hour to 4 hour periods. So this is where people are away for long periods of the day. And this really is space that should come back into the business. It's a real opportunity area. So what does this mean in real terms? Again, we're very much a real estate audience here, but your business is probably saying to you, well, it's great, you've got some graphs, you've got some ideas. What's that mean to me? So we need to take this another step forward. Now, in a 600 desk building, with these results that we've got here, this means that we have up to 54 minutes available per desk per day. And if we ramp that up, that equates to about 54 hours a day as well, overall in the whole building, okay? Which, whilst you can't really, you can't collect that in one pocket, it does present a significant amount of time to do something with. So that means you need to get that availability back into the space. Another way of looking at it is with this matrix here. Now what we've got is utilization on the horizontal and mobility on the vertical. And the top left corner has the high utilization but low mobility team. So these are the guys that are sat at their desks all day. They're there looking, they're usually like admin or kind of probably workers are very much in a fixed environment. So you concentrate on those guys for an ergonomic, good desk design. The top right quadrant looks at more mobile guys, and these are candidates for behavioral change. So if we can get these guys to maybe not necessarily keep their desk, move them around, release their desk back to the business, that presents an opportunity. But the real opportunity here is this low utilization levels at the bottom. And this is where, if we wanted to do something differently within the business, affect some kind of cultural change or maybe release some of that space, this is the point we really need to be going after. So how do we do this? So I was going to walk you through an analytical example, and again, using 600 desks, bear that in mind. And what I will do is categorize each one of those desks into different measured levels of utilization. Okay? So just to explain that, the 60% and above, there's 400 desks in this example, 410 desks that have over 60%, and vice versa throughout the other settings there. Now, if we're talking about a building that operates on a one-to-one desk sharing ratio, this is quite ineffective. But if you then recalculate that to make that an accurate fit for the utilization measured and look at a 1.2 share ratio, you can save up to about 55 desks in this example, which does result in a definite reduction in allocation. Now, if you then take this a step further and take the intelligence that you've now got, you know what's going on in the business, and you want to push this into a business case, to talk to your CFOs, your CEOs, to get things happening, we start to look at different effects and different events. So we're looking at different locations. Now, in this example, we've chosen five properties. And I'm showing you here the different square meterage of each of those properties. And again, if we run a similar scenario where we understand exactly what's going on in those spaces, we've done a number of tests and surveys, and we're working out the actual utilization is a lot lower, we can recalculate the share ratios for those buildings. And that affects the amount of square meterage or square footage that you'll actually need in those spaces. In fact, it's recalculated as so. So in that reduction in space will then allow you to theoretically calculate how much that is worth for you when you add in the factor of total cost of occupancy. Okay? So that gives you a figure which you can then use to start building your business case. Now, clearly, each location will have a different potential that you can work towards. And in this example, we've used those figures there. So this is the bit that I think, at this point, do you then go, right, I've got a business case. I know what's going on in my buildings quite clearly. I've got some factual-based evidence. Do I then go to the board and say, look, we've got this opportunity to do this, let's do it? Clearly, the best opportunities there are locations 1 and 3. And whilst I love data and technology, my favourite part about it is when somebody makes it really simple for me. It's not hard to digest. You can see it. And what I've done there is made them nice and fat so you can see the opportunities. So clearly, from that, you would go for location 1 and 3 because they're the biggest opportunities. But what we're not considering is a dimension of time. Now, if we have a 2-year opportunity or a 2-year window of opportunity, and we then consider the lease events during that time, we can then see that location 1 doesn't give us an opportunity to make any savings or change. However, locations 2, 3, and 5 do. So that kind of takes you up to that point where you're quite clear about what you can do given a window of opportunity. Now, what I've done there, I've kind of flied through that fairly quickly. I hope it made sense to everybody. But in a nutshell, the opportunities are 3 ways. And I wanted to talk to you about 3 things. So in summary, I think it's really, really important that utilization is understood and measured, certainly to drive some of the brilliant schemes and ideas that we've all got in this room. And getting to that level of detail is important for your business. So it's definitely something to look at. The danger is, of course, we'll be stuck in the 70s, which none of us want to be, of course, although apparently it was quite a lot of fun. Technology is really a great way for us to tap into this information and these resources and provide that valuable business case. I know particularly in certain environments, numbers are very important, so we need to be able to demonstrate how we can get these opportunities. And finally, I think the analysis, so the data on its own is great, but let's make that analysis relevant to the people you want to talk to. So the intelligent analysis is the important part that glues together the surveying and all of the data capture and the technology. Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time. Been a good audience.
You're a bit faster than I thought.
Oh,
fantastic. Love it. Thank you for that. I thought it was brilliant to present data and sometimes quite, it can be quite hard to present data
Very
and
true.
still get your point across. Questions?
I think they must have all got it, which is good.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, should we do the trick question and get someone up on stage and explain it back to us?
That's a really good idea. Should we do
That's what my teacher used to do.
Well, if you do want to discuss it in any detail, I'll be outside for the rest of the day and happy to answer any questions that you've got then. Cheers, guys.
All right. Thank you for that. Very good.